Take it off." The boy's voice carried the whole length of the memorial walk. "That ribbon. Take it off. There's no way you fought, Granny. They don't hand those out to somebody's grandmother. So you have got about 3 seconds to unpin it before I find somebody who will make you." He was 19, maybe 20, in fresh training utilities, with the stiff creases of a uniform that had never been anywhere, and he stood over the old woman on the stone bench, the way young men stand when they have decided a thing is beneath them. Behind him, a quarter-mile off, a saluting battery thumped through a rehearsal, the flat boom rolling across the parade field and breaking against the granite wall. It was graduation week at the post, and the trainee companies were being walked down the memorial walk one platoon at a time, past the long slab of carved names in the last days before they became soldiers. The old woman did not take off the ribbon. She did not, in fact, do anything at all. She sat with a single white flower laid across her knee, her hands folded over it, and she let the boy's words land and fall away like rain off a roof. Her cardigan was a plain, soft red, the kind a woman buys for comfort and not for show. Her gray hair was neat. At her collar, half in shadow, was a small tarnished ribbon, old enough that the colors had gone to the muted shades of something carried a long way. She sat with the stillness of someone who had already survived worse mornings than this one. The wall behind her ran 40 yards of polished gray granite, and it held more names than a person could read in a single morning. Soldiers of this post, who had not come home, cut into the stone in neat military rows that went back through a dozen wars. On weekends, families came and pressed paper to the letters and rubbed them dark with the side of a pencil. Old men came alone and stood a long time and went away without speaking to anyone. The trainee companies were marched past it on purpose in their last week, so that the first thing they carried out of this place would be the weight of the ones who had gone before them. Most of the boys walked the length of it and felt nothing yet. They were too young, the names were not theirs, and the heat and the marching had worn them down to thinking only about their own feet. The old woman had a name on that wall. It was the only reason she had come. The way it was, the only reason she came every June. And she had been sitting quietly with it for the better part of an hour before the boy in the fresh uniform decided she was a problem that needed solving in front of an audience. 20 feet up the walk, a drill sergeant named Booker Quaid had a touring platoon halted in a loose column, and he was watching the bench. He had been a drill sergeant for 6 years and a soldier for 24, and he had learned to read people the way other men read weather. Something about the scene at the bench was wrong, and it took him a moment to place it. It was not the boy. Loud boys were the most ordinary thing in the world. It was the woman. She had not flinched. Not when the boy raised his voice. Not when the cannon spoke. She held her spine like a plumb line. The boy's name was Private Colton Reeves, and a private with an audience is a dangerous thing. He half-turned to make sure the squad behind him was watching, and another trainee, Del Mowery, had lifted his phone and was filming with the grin of a boy who already knew this would do numbers. That was all the fuel Reeves needed. "You hear me," he said, louder now, leaning down. "I'm being nice. This is a memorial walk. This is for people who actually did something. So you can sit here, playing dress-up, or you can move along before this gets official." The old woman lifted the white flower an inch, straightened it, and set it down again. She glanced once, briefly, at a name carved into the wall behind her. A small, private motion, there and gone. And then she returned her eyes to the boy. She did not argue. People who have nothing left to prove rarely do. "There's no way you fought," Reeves said again, because it had gotten a laugh the first time, and boys repeat what gets a laugh. "Look at you." She looked up at him then, not fast, not afraid. She raised her eyes to his face and held them there, level and unhurried. and the boy, who had been braced for a flinch, got nothing back at all. It unsettled him in a way he could not have named. A person who is afraid gives you something to push against. She gave him only that steady, patient attention, the attention of someone who has watched far worse than him come and go. So, the way boys do when they are unsettled, he got louder. "All right," Reeves said, planting his boots. "Tell me what it is, then. That ribbon. Go on. Bet you can't even tell me what it's supposed to be." The old woman answered without hesitation and without heat, 4 words laid down flat as paving stones. Distinguished Service Cross. Second only to one. For half a second, the boy's certainty wobbled. He had expected stammering or silence or some old lady deflection. He had not expected the name delivered like a fact read off a page, in the right order, with the right weight. He covered the wobble the way the proud always do, by pushing harder. "Yeah, okay," he said, laughing for the camera. "Sure, except they didn't give those to women, sweetheart. So whatever you bought it wrong." "They have given that decoration to women," she said. The same flat register. No triumph in it. "Not many. The award does not check first which you are before it is earned. It checks what you did." She paused. "You have the history wrong. That is all right. They do not teach it well." She did not say it to wound him. There was no edge in it at all. And that was the strangest part. A woman defending a lie would have reached for outrage, or for tears, or for the wounded dignity that fools mistake for proof. She reached for none of it. She corrected the boy the way a teacher corrects a sum, without any investment in whether he believed her, because she did not need him to. The truth of a thing does not depend on the boy standing in front of it. Quaid had spent enough years making soldiers to know the difference between the people who perform certainty and the people who simply have it. The performers fill silences. This woman let them sit. When Reeves talked over her, she did not talk louder. She waited for him to finish, and then said her piece once, plainly, and let it stand. It was the bearing of someone who had spent a life in rooms where talking too much got people killed. He looked at the ribbon again, and at the careful way she held her hands, and the certainty drained out of him, and was replaced by something closer to dread. Because if that ribbon was real, then this morning was about to become a story that no one on this walk would ever forget. Quaid, drifting closer now with one of his junior cadre at his shoulder, heard the cadence of it and felt the hair come up on his arms. It was not the defensiveness of a fraud. Frauds got loud, or they got tearful, or they ran. This was something else entirely. The unbothered precision of someone reciting from inside the house, not peering in through the window. He looked again at the ribbon, and this time he looked the way a professional looks. It was not a costume pin. The cloth was right. The devices were right. He had seen exactly one of those in person in his whole career, on a man so old he could barely stand, and the room had gone quiet around him. "Drift over with me," Quaid said, low, to the cadre beside him, eyes open. "That is not a tourist." At the bench, the old woman straightened the white flower a third time. Her gaze went again to the carved name on the wall, lingered a breath longer than before, then came back. The audience understood it now, even if the boy did not. She had not wandered here off a bus. She had come here on purpose, the way a person comes to keep an appointment with someone who can no longer keep it themselves. "Who are you even talking to?" Reeves said, following her glance to the wall and finding nothing he could read. "There's nobody there. It's a list." "It is not a list to me," she said. It was the quietest thing she had said, and somehow it landed the hardest, and for a moment even Reeves had no answer to it. The cannon boomed again across the field. Every trainee on the walk flinched at the sound. a small, involuntary jerk down the whole column. The old woman did not. Mowery's phone caught all of it, the flinching boys, and the one still figure at the center who had not moved at all. Reeves saw it too, and instead of wondering why a grandmother would sit unmoved through a sound that made trained recruits jump, he took it as a dare. "You think you're tough," Reeves said, and now the meanness in it had a point, the way a joke sharpens into a weapon when a boy decides he is losing. "That's cute. Hey, everybody, come look. We got ourselves a bench general over here." The squad drifted in, 6 or 7 of them, glad of any break from the heat and the marching, and they made a loose half-ring around the bench. Mowery moved for the angle. Reeves fed on it. He told them she was wearing a medal she'd found in a drawer. He told them she'd probably been somebody's secretary once, and decided that made her a soldier. The laughter came easy, the cheap laughter of young men who have not yet learned that the joke is sometimes standing right in front of them wearing a red cardigan. One of them asked her, loudly, which war she had won. Another wanted to know if the medal came with the cardigan. Reeves told them she had probably bought the whole outfit at a thrift store on the way in, and somebody laughed hard enough to snort, and the sound of it fed the next thing and the next. It is an easy current to fall into, the comedy of cruelty, and none of them were bad boys exactly. They were 19, and bored and hot, and quietly afraid of graduating into a world they did not understand. And here was a soft target that would not fight back, and so they hit it, the way young men hit things that cannot hit them. The old woman gave them nothing to push against. She did not plead, and she did not perform. She sat with the bearing of a woman at a graveside, which in a sense she was. And the longer she sat without reacting, the more uncomfortable the few watching adults became, slowing on the path, glancing at one another, none of them quite willing to be the first to say aloud that this had stopped being funny several minutes ago. There is a particular cowardice that lives in crowds, and it was alive and well on the memorial walk that morning. Through all of it, the old woman sat. She did not raise her voice to be heard over them. She did not appeal to the crowd. When the boy spoke, he spoke in paragraphs, long and looping, and pleased with themselves. When she answered, if she answered, it was in a handful of words. And the asymmetry of it, his noise against her quiet, began to feel, to the few adults on the walk who slowed to watch, like something they should be uncomfortable about, though they could not have said why. "Come on," Reeves said finally, spreading his hands wide for the camera. "This is Army ground, Granny. This walk is for the people who earned it. So let's go. Up. The tour bus is the other way." "I will sit a while longer," the old woman said. "I have someone to sit with." "There's nobody here but us." "There is, though," she said, and let it rest. Quaid was close now, but the boulevard had filled with the slow morning traffic of a graduation day. Family cars, a shuttle, a line of folding chair trucks bound for the field, and a knot of arriving spectators had clotted the walk between him and the bench. He pressed through them with the patience of a man who does not want to start a scene he cannot finish cleanly. The saluting battery thumped a third time. The boys jumped. The old woman did not, and this time Mowery swung the phone to her deliberately, zooming on the still face, the unbothered eyes, the hands folded on the flower, because some animal part of even a foolish 19-year-old had begun to sense there was a better story here than the one his friend was telling. If you have ever watched the young decide that an old woman is nobody, stay with this one, and subscribe to the Veteran Vault, because what is about to happen on this walk is the whole reason the channel exists. Reeves did not feel the ground moving under him. He felt instead the thrill of an audience, and he mistook the old woman's calm for the calm of someone who had no cards to play. He could not have been more wrong, but he was 19, and at 19 the difference between a quiet person with nothing and a quiet person with everything is invisible. You didn't even flinch at the gun, he said, half admiring and half accusing, circling now. What is that, huh? What is that? Practice, the old woman said. It stopped being a joke between one breath and the next, the way these things do. You know what? Reeves said, and the grin went flat and ugly. I've seen the videos. Stolen-Valor. People like you. Wearing what guys died for so you can feel important on a Tuesday. I'm not laughing anymore. Take the ribbon off, hand it to me, and we'll let the MPs decide if you get to keep playing soldier. No, the old woman said. Just that. No. The refusal seemed to scald him. He reached down and plucked the white flower off the bench, not to throw it, just to hold it out of her reach, the small and telling cruelty of a man who has found he cannot move the mountain and so kicks the pebble in front of it. The old woman's eyes followed the flower. For the first time, something moved behind them, and it was not fear. It was a kind of grief held under glass. That's mine, she said quietly. Then come get it. He dangled it. Or admit you're a fraud. One or the other, Granny. A few feet off, two parents in graduation polo shirts looked at the scene, looked at each other, and decided in the silent, cowardly way of crowds that it was not their business. A junior cadre member, a young corporal, hovered at the edge with his mouth half open and his nerve nowhere, intimidated by the performance, unwilling to be the one to challenge a trainee in front of a phone. For one ugly minute, the whole apparatus of the place, the uniforms, the wall, the heritage they were all marching past, failed the woman sitting at its center. She watched the boy, level, hands flat on her knees, now that the flower was gone, and she said nothing, and she waited. She was used to waiting. She had waited in worse places than this. The flower was a small white carnation, the kind sold in plastic sleeves at the commissary. Nothing rare, nothing expensive. She bought one every June, and she laid it at the same name, and the boy was holding it over his head now, like a prize at a fair, turning it so the camera could see, narrating his own cleverness. He did not know what it was for. That was the thing about cruelty performed for an audience. It was always swinging at targets it could not see. He thought he was holding a prop. He was holding the only gift a living woman had left to give a man who had been dead for 35 years, and he was waving it around for a laugh. Sutherland did not lunge for it. She would not give him the satisfaction. She kept her hands flat on her knees and her eyes on his face, and she waited, because the alternative was to let him make her small. And she had decided a long time ago, in a colder and darker place than this, that there were things a person did not do no matter the cost. Giving these boys the show they wanted was one of them. So she waited, and she let the silence do what silence does, which is grow heavier the longer it goes on. It was then that a trainee at the back of the press, a heavy-set kid who had locked his knees in the rising heat, made a small sound and started to fold. He went gray, and his eyes rolled up, and his weight pitched backward, and before any of the cadre had even registered it, before Reeves had turned his head, the old woman was already half off the bench, one hand out, her voice cutting across the morning crisp and clean and absolutely certain. Sit him down. Get him down before he drops. Head between his knees. Somebody put water on his neck, not in his mouth. Loosen the collar. A beat. Sharper. Now. They did it. That was the strange part. The part the boys would talk about later. A grandmother in a red cardigan gave 4 orders, in a voice like a dropped blade, and a whole squad of soldiers-to-be obeyed her before they thought about it. Because the voice did not ask. The voice did not hope. The voice expected. And the heavy-set boy went down safely into his buddy's hands, instead of cracking his skull on the granite curb. The old woman watched him a moment longer, saw his color start to come back, and then, as simply as she had risen, she folded back down onto the bench and went still again. For 1 second, she had sounded like someone who had given orders under far worse conditions than a hot parade field. And Quaid, finally breaking through the last of the crowd at the edge of the bench, had heard every word of it, and his face had changed. "Private." Quaid's voice came down like a gate. He stepped between Reeves and the bench, square and unhurried, a big man who did not have to hurry. "Step back. Right now. Hands at your sides." Reeves blinked, the audience glow draining out of him at the sight of an actual drill sergeant. "Sergeant, this lady's wearing stolen—" "I said step back." Quaid did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The boy stepped back. Quaid put himself fully in front of the old woman, half shielding her, and when he spoke again, it was lower, meant for Reeves alone, though the closest of the squad caught it. "Son," he said, "you have no idea what you are standing in front of. Do you see that ribbon? Do you see it? That is a Distinguished Service Cross. That is the second highest award this country gives a soldier for valor. A man can spend 30 years in this uniform and go his whole career and never once stand next to one. You found one on a bench on a Tuesday, and you have spent 10 minutes calling her a liar with a phone in her face." The squad had gone quiet. Mowery had stopped grinning, though he had not stopped filming. Reeves, humiliated now in front of the very people he had been performing for, did the thing that proud and frightened boys do instead of the smart thing. He dug in. "Or," Reeves said, "she's wearing it because nobody ever checked. You don't know either, Sergeant. With respect. Let the MPs run her. If she's legit, fine. If she's not," he lifted his chin, "then I was right. And everybody saw it." Quaid looked at him for a long moment, and there was something almost like pity in it. Then he keyed the radio clipped at his shoulder, turned a quarter away, and spoke into it in the clipped shorthand of a man passing a problem up a chain. "Cadre Net, this is Quaid on the Memorial Walk. I need the senior on the Heritage detail, and I need to know who is escorting the reviewing party in. We have a situation at the wall I want eyes on before it goes any further. Break, and somebody pull the first sergeant. Tell him it is about a visitor with a service cross. He will understand." Quaid had not radioed because he was unsure. He had radioed because he was sure. And a man who has been a soldier for 24 years knows that when something is about to go very wrong in front of cameras, you get it on the record and you get the right people moving before the wrong thing finishes happening. He did not yet know exactly who the old woman was. He knew she was the genuine article, and he knew that meant the boy in front of him had already stepped off a ledge and simply had not started falling. The young corporal who had frozen earlier crept up to Quaid's elbow. "Sergeant," he whispered, "is she really—" And Quaid cut him off with a look. "She is whatever that ribbon said she is," he said quietly. "And that ribbon says she is one of maybe a few hundred living Americans who ever earned it. So you stop whispering, and you start standing up straight, because in about 2 minutes this is going to be the most important thing you have ever watched, and you are going to want to remember that you stood right for it." The corporal straightened. He stood right. He let go of the key. Out on Victory Boulevard, beyond the thinning crowd, the morning traffic had begun to clear. The family cars waved through, the lane along the parade field opening up the way a road opens when something important is coming, and the police at the intersections have started holding everyone else back. The old woman's eyes went to the boulevard. Just once. A flick, a read, the unconscious geometry of someone measuring a road and the speed of what was moving on it, and then back. She had clocked the cleared lane before anyone else on the walk had even noticed it was cleared. "He thinks he holds the high ground," the narrator might have told you, watching the boy lift his chin at a drill sergeant. He thought he was in command of this. He was the only person on the walk, who did not yet understand that the ground had already shifted beneath him, and that the next vehicle up that cleared Boulevard was going to change his life. What this young man does not know is what the next few minutes are about to teach him. Subscribe to the Veteran Vault so that you do not miss the moment it lands. Reeves looked from the drill sergeant to the old woman, cornered, proud, certain that backing down now in front of the camera was worse than anything that could come of pushing on. And so he made the worst choice available to him. He decided to take the ribbon himself. The desert, then. The film leaves the bright walk for the only time, because there are things the boy with the phone will never know, and the people watching deserve to. It is the last week of February, 1991, and it is cold, the way only a desert is cold at night, a dry cold that gets into the bones and stays. 4 soldiers lie in a scrape in the ground, far on the wrong side of the line, a long-range surveillance team put in by helicopter 2 nights before to watch a particular stretch of road for the mobile launchers that have been killing people a country away. Staff Sergeant Margot Sutherland is 33 years old. She has been in the Army 14 years. She is the most experienced soldier in the whole, and when the team leader is hit, the whole becomes hers. They are compromised on the 3rd night. A goat herd, a radio, it does not matter how. Behind the lines, it is always only a matter of time, and the dark fills with the sounds of men coming to find them. The team leader, a 23-year-old second lieutenant named Truett Vandermeer, fresh-faced and 1 year out of commissioning, takes a round through the leg and then another high in the side, and he goes down hard against the cold dirt and doesn't get up. Sutherland takes the rally point and the radio. She takes the night. She works the radio in a voice that does not climb. She calls the fires in. She reads the map by feel and memory and the thin wash of starlight. And when the enemy gets close enough that there is no clean way to break them off her team, she does the thing they teach you and pray you never have to do. She walks the aircraft onto her own position, gives them her own coordinates, danger close, and presses her face into the dirt, and holds her men down with the flat of her arm, while the world comes apart 800 meters, and then 400 meters, and then, right on top of them. Numbers are the only thing that does not lie out here. 3 confirmed launch sites, 2 wounded, 11 hours since insertion, 800 meters to the pickup zone. She would tell you, if she ever told anyone, which she did not, that the thing nobody warns you about is how quiet your own voice has to stay. The whole world is coming apart, the ground jumping, the air full of grit and noise, men shouting in 2 languages. And the one job that matters is to keep your voice on the radio flat and slow and clear, because the pilots 40 seconds out are listening to you, and only you. And if your voice climbs even a half step, they will hear the fear in it, and the rounds will land wrong, and your own people will die. So she kept it flat. She read the grid in the same tone a person would use to read a grocery list. She had practiced that voice for 14 years, without knowing she was practicing it for this one night, and it held, and the fires fell where she put them. When there is a gap, she takes it. She gets Vandermeer over her shoulders, a grown man in full kit, dead weight, his blood soaking cold through her own jacket, and she carries him across 800 meters of open ground toward the sound of the inbound helicopter, one boot in front of the other, refusing every meter to put him down, because you do not put them down. That is the whole of it. That is the only rule that has ever mattered to her. She does not remember the carry as effort. She remembers it as arithmetic. So many steps. So many breaths between steps. Twice she went down under his weight, and twice she got back up, because the alternative was to leave him, and she had never in her life left anyone, and she was not going to start in a foreign desert with a boy who had a whole life still in front of him if she could only get him to the helicopter. Her knees would never be the same after that night. She did not know that yet. She knew only the arithmetic and the cold and the warm, wet weight of the lieutenant breathing against the back of her neck, each breath a small, stubborn argument against the dark. Her radio man stays behind to cover the withdrawal. Sergeant Lonnie Ainsworth, 26, from a town she could find on a map, blindfolded, because he told her about it on a dozen cold nights. Keeps the net up so the fires keep falling where they are needed. Keeps talking in that easy drawl right up until the end. And the last thing he ever says into the handset, he says to her, "Go, pale horse. I've got the net. Go." She went. She had to go. The lieutenant on her shoulders was still breathing, and the man on the radio had given her the seconds to keep him that way. The helicopter took them out into a gray dawn. Lonnie Ainsworth did not come out. They gave her the call sign that night, the one his voice put on her, Pale Horse. And months later, in a room with the windows covered, a man with stars on his shoulders pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to her chest and shook her hand and told her the whole thing would be sealed for a long time. And it was. 35 years. She carried the lieutenant 800 meters to the bird. She had carried the radio man every single day since. And then the desert burned away in the bright June light. And it was a Tuesday again. And an old woman in a red cardigan sat on a bench in front of a wall with one name on it that mattered more than all the rest. And a 19-year-old boy's hand was already moving toward the ribbon at her collar. Reeves grabbed her wrist. He did it fast, the way you do a thing you have already half-talked yourself out of, snatching her left wrist with his left hand to pin it, and reaching with his right for the ribbon at her collar, meaning to tear it free and hold it up and be proven right in front of all of them. His fingers closed. He felt how thin her wrist was under his hand, an old woman's wrist, and it confirmed everything he believed. The old woman did not pull away. She did not cry out. She let him hold her wrist, and she looked up into his face with that same level patience. And then her free hand came up and closed once around his forearm. It was not fast. That was what he would never be able to explain afterward, to the investigators or to himself. It was not a strike or a twist or anything he could have called an attack. Her hand simply closed, slow and certain and final, the way a vice closes. And there was a strength in it that had no business living in a 68-year-old hand, a strength that came up out of 14 years and 800 meters, and a man's full weight carried across open ground in the dark. And for 1 second, Private Colton Reeves understood, in the deep, wordless place where the body knows things before the mind admits them, that he had made a terrible mistake. He could not move his arm. He could not have moved it for anything. She held him exactly 1 beat, long enough for the knowledge to reach his eyes. Then she let go. He stumbled back a half step the instant she released him, cradling his own forearm, and the look on his face was no longer contempt. It was the look of a boy who has put his hand on a stove he was certain was cold. He had felt, for 1 second, the thing that lived under the stillness, and his body believed it even though his pride was already scrambling to explain it away. There had been no violence in it. She had not hurt him. She had only shown him, for the length of a single heartbeat, that the gentleness he had mistaken for weakness was a choice she was making, and could unmake, and was choosing every second not to. "Don't," she said, very quietly, so quietly that only he and Quaid heard it. "You don't want this on your record, son. Step back now, and most of this is still fixable." For a moment he could only stare at her, his wrist forgotten, his own arm aching where her hand had been. Then Quaid had a fist in the back of his collar and hauled him bodily off the bench and a stride backward, and the drill sergeant's voice finally did rise. Once. Hard. "That is enough." He set the boy on his feet and held him there. "You put your hands on her. In front of a camera, on this walk, You put your hands on that woman. Do you have any idea? He stopped himself. His jaw worked. Mowry was still filming, white-faced now, and Quaid did not even bother to tell him to stop, because something else had taken the morning over. Out on Victory Boulevard, engines. Not the slow drift of family cars. A tight, disciplined sound. Several heavy vehicles moving together at a steady pace. The unmistakable cadence of a convoy that owns the road it is on. The police at the intersections had stopped all the other traffic. Small flags stood stiff on the fenders of the lead vehicle. Every cadre head on the walk turned toward the boulevard at once, the way iron filings turn, and the trainees, sensing it, fell silent and instinctively dressed their ragged line. Quaid felt it before he understood it, the way you feel a train through your feet before you hear it. The whole texture of the morning had changed. The cadre were straightening. The loose graduation day sprawl of the place was tightening into something formal and alert, and at the center of it, the old woman sat looking at the road with an expression he could not read, an expression that might have been dread and might have been hope, and was, he would understand much later, simply recognition. The old woman's eyes closed for just a moment. Then they opened, level and clear, and went to the road. The lead vehicle of the reviewing officer's motorcade slowed, and then, opposite the memorial walk, with the whole graduation morning waiting for it up at the field, it stopped. Dead. In the middle of the cleared boulevard. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then doors were opening, and a young major was climbing out of the second vehicle too fast, a folder still in his hand, calling something about the schedule that nobody answered. From the lead vehicle, a man stepped out into the morning sun, and the 4 silver stars on each shoulder of his service uniform caught the light and threw it. General Truett Vandermeer was 58 years old. He had commanded at every level the Army had to offer, had buried friends in 3 wars, had stood in rooms where the most powerful people on earth waited on his judgment, and there was not one soul on that boulevard who outranked him or anything close to it. His aide, Major Sutton Vey, hurried at his shoulder, still trying to reconcile the stop with the timeline, and the general did not so much as glance at him. He had seen something from the window of a moving car that he had been looking for on and off for 35 years, and he walked away from his own motorcade and across the grass toward a bench at the wall, as if the rest of the morning had simply ceased to exist. He stopped a few feet from the old woman. He looked at her for a long moment, and the hard, commanding face of a 4-star general did something that none of his staff had ever seen it do. It came apart, very gently, into the face of a much younger man. "Pale horse," he said. His voice was not steady. "It's you." I never stopped looking. The old woman rose from the bench. Slowly, with the care of a body that has been broken and mended more than once, she stood, and she faced him, and the white flower fell forgotten to the grass. "Lieutenant," she said. "No," he said, and he was shaking his head, and his eyes were bright. "No, ma'am, not today." And General Truett Vandermeer, 4 stars, commander of more soldiers than the old woman could count, came to attention in front of the bench and brought his hand up in a slow, exact salute, and held it. Held it. A 4-star general holding his salute for a woman in a soft red cardigan, while a whole field full of soldiers watched. Sergeant Major Sutherland carried me 800 meters across open ground after I was hit, he said, loud now, for everyone, his hand still up. She held a rally point alone against a force that should have killed all of us. She called fire onto her own position to break them off my body. The least, the very least, I can do is cross a road and render her the honors this country owes her and sealed away for 35 years. Major Vey had gone still. Then he opened the folder in his hands, found the page that had quietly been declassified that very spring, and began to read the citation aloud in a carrying voice. The theater, the year, 1991, the act, the decoration. And when he reached the line that named Sergeant Lonnie R. Ainsworth, who gave his life manning the radio so his team leader could be carried to safety, the whole memorial walk went silent. And then, in a long, ragged wave that started with the cadre and ran down through the trainee companies and out across the field, every soldier within sight of that bench came to attention. It did not happen all at once. It happened the way a wind moves across a field of wheat, a ripple you can actually see traveling. The drill sergeants first, who understood it fastest, snapping to with a precision that made the air crack. Then the cadre around them. Then the trainee companies catching it row by row and standing taller than 9 weeks of training had ever made them stand. Then, impossibly, the families along the rope at the edge of the field, the fathers who had served, and the mothers who had waited, rising to their feet without quite knowing why, because something was happening at the wall and the whole post had turned toward it. Hundreds of people, standing in silence in the bright morning, for an old woman in a red cardigan who had spent the last hour being told she was a fraud. The old woman lifted her own hand and returned the general's salute. And Private Colton Reeves, standing in Quade's grip with the phone still pointed at the bench, watched the face of the woman he had called a liar, and his own face went through it one stage at a time. Confusion, then disbelief, then the sick, dawning recognition, then horror, as he understood that the grandmother he had been mocking for a phone camera was the reason the most powerful man on the post was alive to review his graduation. He had wanted everyone to look. Now everyone did. Reeves's legs had gone strange under him. He was not relieved from anything yet, not formally, but he could feel the whole weight of what he had done settling onto his shoulders, and it was heavier than anything First Sergeant Keach could ever lay there. He had wanted to be the boy who exposed a liar. He had spent 10 minutes building that story in front of a camera that had caught every second of it. And the story had turned out to be true in every way except the one he had told, because there had been a fraud on that walk this morning, a person pretending to be something they were not. It had been him. It moved fast after that, the way consequences do once they finally arrive. First Sergeant Roland Keach came across the grass at a near run, having gotten Quade's word over the net, and then seen the impossible sight of the reviewing general standing at the wall, and he took one look at the situation and a private standing in a drill sergeant's grip, and he understood enough. He put Reeves at rigid attention and relieved him from the graduation detail on the spot, his voice low and flat and absolutely final, the kind of dressing down that does not need volume because it carries a career in it. Mowry's phone was taken as evidence, the boy surrendering it with shaking hands. The other trainees stood frozen in their ranks, every one of them grateful in the deep, cowardly, honest way of young men that it had been Reeves and not them. Keach was a hard man and a fair one, and he did not raise his voice because the worst dressing downs never need it. He told Reeves quietly exactly what he had done, not the cartoon of it, the real shape of it, that he had put his hands on a decorated soldier old enough to be his grandmother and called her a criminal for wearing what she had bled for, and that he had done it in the uniform of the United States Army, and that the uniform did not belong to him to disgrace. He told him that the only reason this was not the end of him was standing 3 feet away in a red cardigan, asking for a mercy he had not earned. Then he stopped talking and let the silence finish the job. It would have gone further. It would have gone as far as the Army can send a thing, and the general's presence guaranteed it. But the old woman stepped forward off the bench and put a hand on First Sergeant Keach's sleeve, and the whole machine paused for her. He's a boy nobody taught yet, she said. Her voice had gone gentle again, the blade put away. Don't end him over an old woman's mourning. I have had worse mournings, and so will he, and he will be a better soldier for one of them. She looked at Reeves, who could not meet her eyes. Stand him at this wall instead. Make him learn the names, every one of them. That will do more than the brig ever could. If this story has reached the place in you it was meant to reach, honor the ones who carry it in silence. Subscribe to the Veteran Vault, and let this old soldier's story find the people who need to hear it. General Vandermeer inclined his head. You always did argue for mercy you would not take for yourself, he said quietly. Sergeant Major, I will see to it personally. He will stand at this wall every weekend until he can recite it in his sleep. And then, lower, just for her, the general and the woman who had carried him standing close together while the mourning rearranged itself around them. I named my son for the man on that radio. I have a Lonnie. I wanted you to know that. The old woman's composure held, as it had held through everything, but her eyes filled, and she nodded once, and did not trust herself to speak for a moment. The crowd began to thin. Up at the field, the parade was reassembling itself, the long machine of the ceremony grinding back into motion, because the army stops for almost nothing, even this. But before he went, the general had a word with Keach, and Keach brought a different boy than the one who had swaggered up to the bench an hour before. A pale, hollowed-out 19-year-old who had learned more in 10 minutes than basic training had taught him in 9 weeks. And the old woman took him by the wrist, the same wrist that had grabbed her, and she walked him to the wall. She found the name without looking. Her fingers knew the place. She pressed the boy's open palm flat against the carved letters and held it there. His name is Lonnie Ainsworth, she said. He had the net so I could carry your general out of that desert. He was 26. He is the reason I have spent 35 Junes coming to this wall, and he is the reason you still have a chance to be the man you have not been today. Her voice did not break, but it came close. Earn it before you call the next old woman a liar. The boy was crying. He did not try to hide it, and he did not try to explain it. And that, more than anything else he had done all morning, was the first thing he had gotten right. He kept his hand on the carved name where she had placed it, and he read it, and he would read it every weekend for the rest of his training, and a long time after that he would still be able to close his eyes and feel the cold of the stone under his palm, and hear an old woman's voice telling him a dead man's name. She bent and picked up the white flower from where it had fallen in the grass and laid it at the base of the wall beneath the name. Then she stepped back and let the boy's hand stay there on the cold stone a moment longer, his head bowed, the general a few paces off with his hat in his hands and his eyes on the same name. 2 old soldiers and a young one in the bright morning, and the valor that had never once needed to shout resting quiet between them. Some warriors fade quietly into the years, but the valor never leaves them. Honor the ones who carry it in silence. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to the Veteran Vault for more.